What if I told you? It was God who urged President Donald Trump to meet Vladimir Putin in Alaska on August 15. It was late at night in Washington, D.C. The White House stood quiet under a sky thick with storm clouds. Inside the Oval Office, President Donald Trump sat alone, staring at a pile of reports. Wars, sanctions, nuclear threats. Every word on the paper seemed to scream one thing: the world was on the edge of destruction. Trump leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. For a moment, the weight of the world felt heavier than ever. Why does everything have to end in conflict? He muttered to himself. Is there no way out? Minutes turned into hours. The clock struck midnight. Suddenly, the air in the room changed. A stillness fell, followed by a radiant light that filled the Oval Office. Trump froze, his heart pounding. From within the brilliance, a figure emerged, tall, majestic, glowing with an aura beyond human comprehension. It was not a dreamlike haze. It was real, clear, undeniable. And then, the voice came, calm, powerful, loving, yet commanding. Donald, the voice said, echoing through the room. The power you hold was never meant for destruction. It was given to you so you might preserve the world. Trump tried to speak but found his lips trembling. His mind, so often sharp and calculating, was now completely blank. The figure continued, go north, beyond your borders, beyond politics. Go to Anchorage, Alaska. There, you will meet the one you call your rival. Do not fear him. Do not despise him. For I, the Lord, have chosen this place. And this moment. A rush of warmth spread through Trump's chest. It was not fear, no. It was something deeper. A conviction. A sense of destiny. The light slowly faded, and the Oval Office returned to darkness. Trump blinked, gasping for air. The clock still read just after midnight. The papers were still scattered on his desk. Yet everything felt different. He whispered to himself, voice shaking, Alaska, August 15th. I have to go. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in Moscow, inside the Kremlin, President Vladimir Putin also sat alone in his office. The night was cold, the city lights glittering like stars beneath him. Putin was known for his composure, his strength, his iron will. Yet even he could not escape the unease of the growing global tension. As he closed his eyes, exhaustion overtook him. And then, it happened. A blinding light flooded the room. Putin's eyes widened. He reached for the desk instinctively, but his hand touched nothing but air. And then he heard it. The same voice that had spoken to Trump, now echoing in Russian, clear as day. Vladimir, true greatness is not measured by armies, nor by power, nor by fear. True greatness is peace. Putin's breathing grew heavy. He clenched his fists, trying to remain calm. But the voice pressed on, go to Anchorage, Alaska, on August 15th. You will meet the one you call your adversary. Do not turn away, for I am the one sending you there. Putin's eyes narrowed. His mind, always skeptical, always questioning, suddenly found no argument. What he felt in that moment was not weakness, but clarity. He bowed his head, whispering words no one in the Kremlin had heard from him before. If this is your will, I will go. The vision faded. The cold silence of Moscow returned. Yet Putin knew, something extraordinary had just happened. Hourglass emoji. Back in Washington, Trump paced the room, unable to sleep. His advisors had warned him for months never to meet Putin without preparation, without conditions, without leverage. But this wasn't politics anymore. He picked up the phone, hesitated, then set it down again. No, this couldn't be explained to anyone yet. Not his advisors, not the press, not even his closest allies. This was bigger than politics, bigger than himself. He looked out the window at the storm clouds breaking apart, the moonlight shining through. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Milky Way emoji. That same night in Moscow, Putin stood at his window, staring out at the Kremlin towers. He, too, felt the strangeness of it all. For years, his decisions had been guided by strategy, by dominance, by the art of control. But tonight, something shifted. Anchorage, August 15th. The words echoed in his mind, like a sacred command he could not ignore. Two men, two nations, two rivals divided by history and ideology. And yet, on the same night, in two different worlds, both heard the same voice. Both were called to the same place. Anchorage, Alaska, August 15th. Not by politics, not by chance, but by the hand of God himself. The morning after the dream, the White House buzzed with its usual activity. Staff rushed through corridors. Phones rang non-stop. Advisors prepared their daily briefings. But inside, Donald Trump carried a secret no one else could see. He sat silently at the long conference table, listening to his national security team discuss escalating tensions with Russia, military options, sanctions, retaliation. Every sentence felt like another brick added to the wall of conflict. Trump drummed his fingers on the table, impatient. His advisors argued numbers, strategies, percentages of risk. But all he heard was the echo of that voice: go to Anchorage, Alaska. Finally, he stood up. The room fell silent. His tone was calm but decisive. Enough. Cancel the rest of today's meetings. Advisors exchanged worried glances. Something was different. Later, in the quiet of his private quarters, Trump called for only two of his most trusted aides. He looked them directly in the eyes. I need a flight. Quiet. No press. No leaks. Destination, Anchorage, Alaska, August 15th. They stared, stunned. Mr. President. Why? One asked. Trump leaned in, lowering his voice. Because I was told to. By someone greater than us all. The aides hesitated, then nodded. They had seen Trump unpredictable before, but never like this. This wasn't a gamble. It felt like destiny. Africa emoji. Meanwhile, in Moscow, at the Kremlin, Putin walked the halls in silence. His advisors bombarded him with updates: NATO exercises, oil negotiations, diplomatic disputes. But his mind was far from all of it. The dream still pulsed in his thoughts. Anchorage, August 15th. That evening, he called his closest security chief. The man entered the office, expression cold, ready for orders. Prepare an unscheduled trip, Putin said firmly. Destination, Anchorage, Alaska. Absolute secrecy. Only you and a handful of men will know. The chief frowned. Comrade President. Alaska? That is American soil. The risks? Putin raised a hand. His eyes sharpened. Do not question. Just prepare it. This journey is not political. It is something else. For a moment, even the hardened security officer felt a shiver. He had never heard Putin speak like this before. The journey begins. Days passed. The date drew closer. On the night of August 14th, two planes took off from two different parts of the world. From Washington, Air Force One lifted into the skies, but with no public announcement. No reporters waiting at Andrews Air Force Base. Only a skeleton crew on board, sworn to silence. Trump sat by the window, staring out at the stars. He felt strangely calm. Lord, he whispered, I don't know why you chose me for this, but I will go. Across the globe, a sleek Russian aircraft took off from Moscow, disguised under the radar as a routine inspection flight. Inside, Putin sat rigid, his hands clasped tightly. He was not a man easily swayed by emotion. But tonight, he carried a sense of mission he had not felt in years. If this is your will, he thought, then Anchorage it will be. Milky Way emoji. The landscape of destiny. Alaska, the land of ice and mountains. Endless wilderness stretching beneath the northern lights. A place where Earth still felt untouched. raw, sacred. Anchorage was chosen not by politics, but by something far greater. Neither man knew why this city, but both obeyed. As Air Force One descended, Trump looked out at the snowy peaks glowing under the midnight sun. He whispered, "It feels like heaven chose this place." Hours later, Putin's plane approached from the opposite direction. From his window, he too saw the mountains, the frozen rivers glittering like glass under the moonlight. His eyes narrowed. But deep down, he felt it, this was holy ground. SUV emoji, the approach. On August 15th, 2 motorcades rolled through Anchorage under strict secrecy. No cheering crowds. No journalists. Only a handful of guards who barely understood what was happening. Trump's convoy arrived first at a remote government facility on the city's outskirts. He stepped out, the crisp Alaskan air filling his lungs. It was cold, yet refreshing. Like a baptism. Putin's convoy arrived minutes later. The vehicles stopped. For a moment, the 2 leaders stood at opposite ends of the courtyard. Soldiers and agents tensed, unsure what to expect. The wind howled through the mountains. The world seemed to hold its breath. Trump took a step forward. Putin followed. Their eyes locked. 2 men who had been portrayed as enemies, rivals, threats to each other's power, now drawn together not by politics, but by something divine. And then, at the exact same moment, both of them whispered the same words under their breath. Last night, I saw God. 2 planes from 2 different worlds. 2 men guided by the same voice. And now, in the frozen silence of Alaska, destiny brought them face to face. Not as presidents, not as enemies, but as men called by something higher. The stage was set. The world would never be the same. The historic meeting, inside the remote government building on the edge of Anchorage. Time seemed to slow. The wind outside roared against the windows, as if the mountains themselves were witnesses to what was about to unfold. 2 men stood face to face. Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin. The world had always seen them as adversaries. Their relationship shrouded in tension, suspicion, and endless speculation. But here, in this quiet Alaskan outpost, there were no cameras, no microphones, no world leaders watching. Only silence, and the lingering presence of something greater. Trump was the first to break the stillness. He extended his hand. For a moment, Putin hesitated, his piercing gaze searching Trump's face, not for weakness, but for truth. Then, slowly, he reached forward and grasped Trump's hand firmly. The handshake was strong, unyielding, yet strangely sincere. And then it happened. At the same time, both men whispered, "Last night, I saw God." Their eyes widened. A chill passed through the room. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't politics. It was confirmation. Milky Way emoji, the conversation begins. They moved into a small chamber. No interpreters. No assistants. Just the 2 of them. The walls were bare. A single wooden table stood in the center, with 2 chairs facing each other. It felt less like a political summit, and more like a confession booth. Trump sat down, leaning forward, his tone unusually calm. "Vladimir, I don't know how to explain this, but I had a dream, a vision. A voice told me to come here, to meet you, to talk about peace." Putin remained silent for a moment, then nodded. "I had the same dream," he said, his voice slow but steady. "The same voice. It told me to come here, to meet you." The 2 men stared at each other. For once, the masks of power and pride fell away. They weren't leaders of superpowers anymore. They were just men, 2 souls confronted by the same divine call. Fire emoji, the weight of responsibility. Trump broke the silence again. "The world is on fire. Nuclear threats, wars, hatred everywhere. I was told that my power is not for destruction, but for preservation. I don't know why God chose me, but I can't ignore it." Putin leaned back, his expression softening. "All my life, I believed strength was about control, about fear, about never bending. But in that vision, I understood. True greatness is not in armies or missiles. It's in peace. That's what he told me. Their words echoed in the small room, heavy with meaning. Hours pass. For the next several hours, the two men spoke not of oil, not of sanctions, not of power. Instead, they spoke of their people, of the children growing up in fear of war, of the families divided by borders and ideologies. Trump said, "I built my life on deals, on winning. But what if the greatest deal is peace itself?" Putin replied, "History remembers conquerors. But maybe it is time history remembers peacemakers." It was a conversation the world never expected. Two of the most powerful men on earth, usually consumed by pride and rivalry, now speaking with humility, because both had been shaken by the same divine encounter. Milky Way emoji, the presence in the room. As they talked, something unexplainable seemed to fill the chamber. Neither of them said it out loud, but both felt it, the presence of God Himself. The air grew warmer, calmer. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to retreat. There was no fear, no hostility, only peace. Trump whispered, almost to himself, "He's here, isn't he?" Putin gave the slightest nod. His usually stern face softened, his eyes moist with something rare, humility. For a brief moment, time felt suspended. Two enemies sat together as brothers. Africa emoji, the agreement. By the end of the night, they made no treaties, signed no official papers. Instead, they made a vow. Trump placed his hand on the table. "Let's end this madness. If we can set aside our pride, maybe the world can too." Putin placed his hand over Trump's. "Then let this be the first step. Not as America and Russia, but as men under God." It wasn't politics. It wasn't strategy. It was a promise. That night, in a small chamber in Anchorage, two men spoke as no one ever imagined they could. Not as rivals, not as leaders locked in endless conflict, but as human beings, humbled by the same divine voice. The world would not know what was said behind those doors. Not yet. But something had shifted. History had taken a turn. Because on August 15th, in the frozen silence of Alaska, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin met not by chance, not by politics, but by the calling of God. The global shock. The morning sun rose over Anchorage, painting the mountains gold. Inside the small government facility, two of the most powerful men on earth were leaving quietly, their secret vow still fresh in their minds. To them, it felt like a holy moment, sealed in silence. But secrets this big never stay hidden for long. Satellite antenna emoji, the first leak. It began with whispers. An airport worker claimed he saw Air Force One landing in Alaska overnight, without press, without ceremony. A fisherman along the icy coast swore he saw a Russian aircraft flying unusually low near Anchorage. At first, nobody believed them. Why would the leaders of America and Russia both be in Alaska, on the same day, without telling the world? But then, a photo appeared. Grainy, blurry, snapped by a local security contractor who had no idea what he was witnessing. Two black motorcades, pulling into the same compound on August 15th. Within hours, the image spread online. Twitter exploded. Newsrooms scrambled. Unconfirmed reports suggest Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin met in Anchorage, Alaska, behind closed doors. The world was stunned. Africa emoji, the media storm. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, RT, Fox News. Every network ran breaking banners. Analysts argued furiously. Some claimed it was impossible, a fabrication. Others said it was the most important meeting of the century. At the United Nations, ambassadors demanded answers. Was this a new secret alliance? A backdoor deal? Or something even stranger? Everywhere, people asked the same question: why Alaska? Why in secret? What are they hiding? USA emoji. In America, Trump's closest advisors were furious. Mr. President, how could you meet Putin without telling us? Without preparation? Without protocol? But Trump simply smiled, shaking his head. Some things are bigger than politics. You wouldn't understand. When pressed further, he added only one cryptic line: history will remember Anchorage. Russia emoji. In Russia. Back in Moscow, Putin's inner circle was equally baffled. Generals demanded to know if nuclear negotiations had taken place. Ministers wanted to know what promises had been exchanged. But Putin dismissed them all. What happened in Alaska, he said, was not politics. It was something higher. You will see. In time. His words, calm and deliberate, unsettled even his closest allies. Putin was not a man who spoke of higher things. Yet now, he did. Silhouetted busts emoji. The people's reaction. On the streets of New York, Moscow, London, and Tokyo, ordinary people speculated endlessly. Some feared a conspiracy. Others believed it was a sign of hope. One American mother said to a reporter, if they met to stop war, then God bless them both. A Russian priest told his congregation, perhaps the Almighty himself brought them together. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Alaska Summit. Hashtag Secret Meeting. And even hashtag Hand of God. Theories spread like wildfire. Was this the start of a new Cold War alliance? Or the first step toward peace? Open book emoji. Whispers of a miracle. Then, an even stranger story began to circulate. A White House staffer anonymously claimed that Trump spoke of a dream that led him to Alaska. At the same time, a Russian security officer leaked that Putin had said almost the same thing, that he too had been called to Anchorage. Coincidence? Or something else? Religious communities across the world seized the narrative. In churches, pastors declared, this was the work of God. In mosques, imams reminded worshippers that peace is divine. Even in synagogues and temples, leaders spoke of a mysterious alignment, two powerful men guided by the same vision. For the first time in decades, the idea spread that maybe, just maybe, God had intervened directly in global affairs. High voltage sign emoji. Division and doubt. But not everyone believed. Critics called it propaganda. Skeptics said it was an elaborate cover-up for secret negotiations. Political rivals accused both leaders of betraying their nations. Yet the more they tried to explain it, the more questions arose. Why Alaska? Why that exact date? And why were both men suddenly speaking less like politicians, and more like men who had seen something holy? Milky Way emoji, the symbol in the sky. On the night of August 15th, as news of the Anchorage meeting consumed the world, something remarkable happened. Over the skies of Alaska, the aurora borealis, the northern lights, blazed brighter than anyone had seen in years. Greens, purples, and shimmering blues lit up the heavens. Pilots reported the sky looked like it was on fire with light. Locals stood outside in silence, watching the phenomenon. Some whispered, it's a sign, others cried openly, believing they were witnessing confirmation of a miracle. Photographs of the aurora spread instantly. Headlines declared, was the Alaska meeting written in the stars? The world had questions. No one had answers. But one thing was certain, August 15th in Anchorage had changed everything. Two men had met in silence, guided by visions they could not ignore. The public was left to wonder, was this politics, coincidence, or divine intervention? The truth remained locked in that small Alaskan room. But for millions around the world, one belief grew stronger each passing day, that on August 15th, 2025, God himself reached down and touched history. The legacy of the Alaska miracle. The days following August 15th were filled with noise, news reports, speculation, arguments, denials. But in the midst of all the chaos, something deeper began to stir. Because while politicians demanded explanations, and journalists searched for facts, ordinary people around the world began to feel hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, Something extraordinary had happened in Anchorage, Alaska, Africa emoji, the ripple effect. In Washington, Trump's tone began to change. His speeches, once filled with defiance, now carried a new weight. He spoke less about dominance and more about destiny. He hinted at a path shown to him and told the American people, the greatest victory is not in war, but in peace. And peace begins with a choice. In Moscow, Putin too surprised his nation. In a televised address, he declared, true strength is not in fear, but in unity. Our meeting in Alaska reminded me that history judges not only battles, but the peace we create. These words, strange, uncharacteristic, almost vulnerable, sent shockwaves across the globe. Both leaders had changed, and the world noticed. Scroll emoji, the quiet agreements. Behind closed doors, new initiatives began. Secret hotlines between Washington and Moscow were restored. Talks about reducing nuclear arsenals were reopened. Joint humanitarian projects were quietly announced. None of these moves were dramatic enough to dominate headlines. But taken together, they signaled something unprecedented, a thaw. Some diplomats called it the Alaska effect. Others called it the miracle accord. Folded hands emoji, faith awakens. But it wasn't just politics. Religious leaders worldwide seized the moment. In Rome, the Pope declared, perhaps God himself reminded us that peace is not just possible, it is necessary. In Moscow, Orthodox priests preached about the hand of God in Anchorage. In America, pastors called it a sign that heaven still speaks. Mosques, synagogues, temples, all echoed the same sentiment. If two of the world's most powerful men could be humbled by divine guidance, then maybe humanity had a chance. Light bulb emoji, the critics. Of course, skeptics pushed back. They claimed the story of the dreams was fabricated, a clever cover for secret negotiations. Political opponents mocked the idea of divine intervention. But the more they denied it, the stronger the legend grew. Because ordinary people wanted to believe. And sometimes, belief is stronger than politics. Milky Way emoji, the day of remembrance. 1 year later, on August 15th, people in Anchorage gathered beneath the northern lights. Thousands lit candles, praying for peace. They called it the Day of the Alaska Miracle. Soon, gatherings spread. In New York, Moscow, London, and Jerusalem, people came together each year on that date, across borders, across faiths. Not everyone believed in the miracle, but everyone remembered the day. How history remembered it, historians debated endlessly. Was it just a secret summit disguised as something holy? Or was it truly divine? But as decades passed, the details mattered less than the legacy. Because history did not just record what happened in that room. It recorded what came after, a slow but undeniable decline in nuclear tensions, a series of unexpected humanitarian collaborations, and, most importantly, a generation that began to see August 15th not as a day of politics, but as a day of hope. Textbooks would one day call it the Alaska meeting. But among the people, it would always be remembered as the Alaska miracle. Shooting star emoji, the final sign. And then, years later, something remarkable happened again. On the anniversary of the meeting, as thousands stood outside in Anchorage with candles in their hands, the sky erupted with auroras brighter than any in living memory. Green waves shimmered. Purple curtains rippled. Golden streaks danced across the heavens. People fell silent, their faces lifted upward. It was as if the sky itself was confirming what they had always believed, that God had chosen this place, this moment, for a reason. A child pointed upward and whispered, "It's His light." And in that moment, everyone, believer or skeptic, felt the same unshakable truth. Something beyond human power had touched the world in Anchorage, Alaska. Two men, two visions, one meeting. What began as a dream became a vow. What began as a secret became a legacy. And though historians may argue, and skeptics may doubt, millions will always remember the night when the Northern Lights danced over Alaska. marking the day humanity stepped back from the brink. August 15th. The day God reminded the world that even in the darkest times, peace is still possible. So what really happened on August 15th in Anchorage, Alaska? Was it a secret summit between two of the world's most powerful men? A quiet negotiation hidden from the public eye? Or was it something far greater, a moment touched by the hand of God himself? We may never know the full truth. The walls of that room will never speak. The men who were there will never reveal everything. But what we do know is that the world changed after that night. Tensions cooled. New paths were opened. And millions of people, across nations and religions, began to believe again. Believe that peace was not just a dream, but a destiny. Because sometimes history is not written in treaties, or in speeches, or even in battles. Sometimes it is written in whispers, in visions, and in the light of the heavens. And so, whether you believe this was politics, coincidence, or a miracle, remember this: if you believe this story carries a message for our world today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, was this politics, or was it divine intervention? On August 15th, 2025, in the frozen silence of Alaska, the course of history was nudged. Not by power, not by fear, but by something higher. The world called it the Alaska Miracle. And perhaps it was.